In these troubled times, we have all had to learn advanced citizening. We've had to learn grad school level international affairs. We've had to at least learn some elementary lawyering, much to the frustration of real lawyers everywhere. But we're called upon to grow by the circumstances in which we find ourselves. And you can tell you're learning new things and crossing over into new intellectual territory when you find yourself learning to say things you really have never had to say before.
I think this falls into the category of what we as prosecutors would analyze and ultimately conclude is awful but lawful.
Awful but lawful. Awful but lawful. Needlepoint that onto a pillow for the 4th of July this year. We've all had to learn about it. Awful but lawful. Tonight we have learned about something new in our politics that is definitely awful, but whether or not it is also illegal is a point of considerable and very interesting contention. And that's next. Stay with us.
When the president or his allies in the House start going out and trying to threaten that they want to reveal classified information,
Nunes, Chairman of the House
individuals want to try to reveal classified information about the identity of an FBI or CIA source, that is against the law.
Senator Mark Warner, who's the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, this weekend saying that efforts by the president or his Republican allies in Congress to reveal a confidential FBI source in an ongoing investigation, he's suggesting that would not only be dangerous, it would be illegal. Republican supporters of the president in Congress have been specifically demanding access to all documents at the Justice Department that relate to an FBI confidential source who made contact during the Trump campaign with Trump campaign advisors who the FBI believed had suspicious contacts with Russia. What is reported to be that source's name, the name of the confidential source, has now surfaced in multiple news outlets. Well, today the president summoned the head of the FBI and the deputy attorney general in charge of the Russia investigation to come meet with him at the White House, which is remarkable enough, given that he is the subject of an ongoing investigation. After that meeting, the White House released a statement saying that it would, quote, immediately set up a meeting with the FBI, Justice Department, and DNI, together with congressional leaders, to review highly classified and other information that they have requested. Handing over information on a confidential FBI source in the middle of an ongoing investigation because the president and the president's supporters want to undermine that investigation, the investigation to which that source has contributed, that's something. That is a break with all kinds of precedent. But given that this pressure on this confidential source has also now led to what is purportedly the revelation of the identity of this source in multiple news outlets, is there a real question as to whether or not this pressure on this confidential source and the revealing of his purported identity, is there a real question as to whether that might be itself illegal? Congressman Jim Himes is a member of the Intelligence Committee in the House. Congressman, it's really nice to have you with us tonight. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Rachel. Good to be with you.
Do you share this concern from Senator Warner that the revelation, or at least the purported revelation of the identity of this confidential source, might be evidence of a crime?
Well, there's no question that giving up the name of a source, whether it's in the intelligent world or in the law enforcement world, if something is classified, putting that out there is absolutely illegal. Look, the case most Americans would remember would be the famous one where one Scooter Libby was convicted of blowing the identity of a CIA operative, Valerie Plame, convicted of that, sentence commuted, and then lo and behold, one President Donald J. Trump pardoned Scooter Libby for that. So clearly that is illegal. Interestingly enough, maybe not for the president. The president is, after all, the declassifying authority. But Rachel, there's a much bigger thing at stake here, which is that as we speak, FBI agents are in places all over this country trying to persuade informants and others to trust them, to help them on a case. As we speak, in places like Moscow and Rome and Baghdad, CIA officers are trying to convince people to help us in keeping the country safe, to betray their country, to hand over secrets. And that does not happen if they can't look those sources in the eye and say, come hell or high water, we will keep you safe. Now we have the president, now we have Devin Nunes, now we have Mark Meadows and any number of congressmen in a political environment saying, hey, we need to know who this is. That is going to, legal or illegal, badly, badly damage this country's national security and its ability to prosecute crimes.
We got a statement tonight from the White House, Congressman, which the White House Communications Director explained that the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, will convene a meeting with the Justice Department, the FBI, the Director of National Intelligence, and congressional leaders to review highly classified and other information they have requested. Do you know what that is about? And do you have any sense of how the Justice Department could handle this in terms of the range of responsible versus reckless?
Well, you know, what's happening here is just, look, it's not a mystery. This has been going on for a year right now. This is driven by Devin Nunes and by a number of representatives of the Freedom Caucus, and they are setting about to damage this investigation. Remember, they don't have to prove anything, and they haven't proved a single thing. We've been dealing with this for a year. The president, Obama bugged Trump Tower. Susan Rice and Samantha Power were exposing, unmasking people's names. This is just the latest spaghetti on the wall. The problem is this one is very, very serious because apparently, and this, you know, you've made this point, apparently we are introducing a whole new concept into American law, which is if you are the subject of or of interest in an investigation, you get to demand that the investigators tell you what they know. Now, obviously that only happens with Donald Trump because he's president of the United States, but every car thief out there, every embezzler, every white-collar criminal, they ought to point to this and say, hey, I want to know what the prosecutors have on me. And that's just a terrible, terrible place to go for the judicial system in this country.
It sounds to me like you fault the president and his supporters in Congress for pushing us to that point, but you also fault the Justice Department for giving in.
Well, you know, these guys they're caught between a terrible rock and a hard place, right? On the one hand, you know, the fact that they have entertained Devin Nunes and others who have demanded to see FISA warrant applications, this is brand new, that they are sicking the Inspector General on this crazy idea that there may have been a quote-unquote spy in the Trump campaign. You know, on the one hand, it's all wrong. On the other hand, I gotta believe that some of these people are saying to themselves, if we don't give them something, we will wake up, and the president, upon whom all of these concepts, legal, illegal, constitutional, constitutional, all of these concepts are completely lost. The president will wake up one morning and end this investigation. And now we've got protests in the streets. We've got a president whose very legitimacy is questioned. So my guess is that they're trying to give a little bit to calm the president without throwing this country into the kind of constitutional crisis that would ensue if the president ended this investigation.
Congressman Jim Himes, member of the House Intelligence Committee. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us. Appeasement, or is there some genius at work here? How do we tell? Joining us now is Benjamin Wittes. He's editor-in-chief of Lawfare. Mr. Wittes, it's nice to have you with us tonight. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's oversimplifying to say appeasement versus strategically flexible genius, but with the understanding that that's an oversimplification, do you come down clearly on one side or the other of that?
Actually, I don't think it's a particular oversimplification. I think it's pretty accurate, and I'm going to throw you a curveball and say I think what they're doing is both. I think they are in an impossible situation, and they're handling it by making a whole lot of incremental adjustments and accommodations that set terrible precedents and that are on their own terms really bad, rotten deals. And they are also playing for time to protect the Mueller investigation. They're keeping their eye on the big picture, which is that they have a major investigation to protect, whose integrity they need to protect, and that needs time to finish its work. And whether at the end of the day the more important component is what you call the appeasement, or the more important component is the tactical rope-a-doping that allows that buys time for Mueller and that protects that investigation, I think we're just going to have to wait and see to find out. But I think, you know, I am at once very uncomfortable with the accommodations that they're making and very sympathetic to the situation that they find themselves in.
And with that understanding, is there something that you feel like absolutely cannot be traded away, that there is something that feels to you like a Rubicon, that once you've gone there, there's no coming back, there's nothing that's worth trading away for that. Is there one thing that you're watching for in terms of something that should be seen as a breaking point?
Yeah, there are two, but one of them, unfortunately, isn't up to them. So one of them is whether the executive branch turns over material about a confidential informant to Congress for purposes of discrediting an investigation of the president. I think that is an unthinkable thing to do. The problem is that that's not really up to them. That's actually up to Donald Trump, whether the executive branch, which is Donald Trump, turns over that information is really his decision to make, unfortunately. The one that is up to them, is whether the Justice Department launches a criminal investigation as distinct from kicking something to the IG based on a fantastical conspiracy theory that the president and his supporters dreamt up. And for the FBI to open a real investigation of such a matter is a Rubicon that they really must not cross. And that's really what the president demanded. And I think what Rod Rosenstein was trying to do in kicking it to the IG was to deflect it, both in the way that you're describing, but also, kicking something to the IG is a little bit less, it's a lot less of a step than opening an investigation in a formal criminal sense.
Benjamin Wittes, editor-in-chief of Lawfare. Always clarifying to speak with you, sir. Thank you very much for being here.
Good talking with you.
All right. Lots to get to tonight. The news gods filled a reservoir of news over the course of today and over the course of this weekend. Swim across it with us when we get back. Stay with us. If you're like me, when you read this headline in the New York Times above a picture of Trump Tower, Trump Jr. and other aides met with Gulf emissary offering help to win election. You may have thought to yourself, yeah, sure, I've known about this for a long time. The Trump Tower meeting with Donald Trump Jr. and hold on, what's that word Gulf doing there? Gulf emissary? I thought the Trump Tower meeting was with Russians. Is this a whole different Trump Tower meeting? Yes, this is a whole different Trump Tower meeting. Pinch yourself. Quote, 3 months before the 2016 election, a small group gathered at Trump Tower to meet with Donald Trump Jr. One was an Israeli specialist in social media manipulation. Another was an emissary for 2 wealthy Arab princes. The third was a Republican donor with a controversial past in the Middle East as a private security contractor. The emissary from the 2 wealthy Arab princes told Donald Trump Jr. that the princes who led Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates were eager to help his father win election as president. Okay. Now, they were eager to help Emirates and Saudi, but it's not clear from this article exactly what the help was that they were offering. They wanted to help, but how did they want to help? That brings us to another one of the guys at this meeting, Joel Zamel, who's been described as a specialist in social media manipulation, the Times is reporting. His company, quote, employed several Israeli former intelligence officers. However much the guy representing the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia was expressing that those countries were eager to help Trump win the election, the way the Times reports it, this other guy, Joel Zamel, was the guy at the meeting who came in with something specific to offer. According to the Times, he, quote, extolled his company's ability to give an edge to a political campaign. By that time, the firm had already drawn up a multi-million-dollar proposal for a social media manipulation effort to help elect Mr. Trump. The plan involved using thousands of fake social media accounts to promote Trump's candidacy on platforms like Facebook. Now, Joel Zamel's lawyer says his client never pitched such a proposal at all. He told us that Mr. Zamel, quote, offered nothing to the Trump campaign, received nothing from the Trump campaign, delivered nothing to the Trump campaign, and was not solicited by or asked to do anything for the Trump campaign. Okay. What we do know from previous New York Times reporting is that Mr. Zamel was stopped at a Washington, D.C. airport in February and had his electronics seized by federal agents working for the special counsel. Mr. Zamel also reportedly later appeared before the grand jury that's been impaneled by the special counsel. His lawyer says he's just a witness in the probe. But this reporting about a supposedly offered social media manipulation proposal, possibly related to this offer of help from the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, this is all new. It's also super weird, right? Because this Trump Tower meeting was in August 2016. We know by then a social media manipulation project that sounds an awful lot like that was already happening in the presidential campaign. It was what we've come to know as the Russian government's interference in our election. Robert Mueller this past February indicted 13 Russians and 3 companies for carrying it out. So this plan that was reportedly pitched by Joel Zamel, this plan that he ostensibly put together, what was that? The Times reports that Joel Zamel's companies do have some ties to Russia, having done work for Putin-linked oligarchs. Is that the connection? If representatives from the Emirates and Saudi Arabia were pitching the Trump campaign a social media manipulation plan to help Trump win the election, was that plan, in fact, the election interference operation that we've been calling the Russian interference effort all this year, or part of it? If not, why prepare a proposal for something that's already being done, something that was already happening at that moment? Hold that thought.
Shipping too. Go to buylisa.com today.
You need this bed.
So the New York Times now reports that 3 months before the 2016 election, Donald Trump Jr. met at Trump Tower with an emissary from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. At that meeting, that emissary told Mr. Trump that those 2 countries wanted to help Donald Trump win the presidential election. Also at that meeting, a man named Joel Zamel, described as an expert in social media manipulation, who reportedly had prepared a multi-million-dollar proposal to help Trump win through tactics like using thousands of fake social media accounts to promote Trump's candidacy online. Now, Mr. Zamel's lawyer denies his client prepared anything or offered anything to the Trump campaign, but according to the Times' reporting, this guy Zamel was paid $2 million right after the election. What for? I don't know. Joining us now is David Kirkpatrick, New York Times international correspondent. Mr. Kirkpatrick, thank you for joining us. I know it is a very late hour for you in England tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Am I correct that your reporting indicates that Joel Zamel's company drew up this proposal for a social media manipulation campaign, but we don't know whether this proposal was ever actually picked up by the Trump campaign? We don't know what happened to the proposed campaign?
Correct. So I think you're overstating his lawyer's denial, by the way. Okay. I don't think there's any dispute that this proposal was drawn up, although there's some conflicting accounts of who commissioned it prior to the meeting. And at the meeting, he spoke about what his company could do for the Trump campaign. Now, maybe in his mind, that wasn't a pitch. Certainly in the formal statement we got from Donald Trump Jr., he understood it to be a pitch. So that's where that's left. And then, as you mentioned, later on, after the campaign is over, during the transition, George Nader, the advisor to the United Arab Emirates, who was president of that meeting, turns around and pays Joel Zamel to put together, or one of his companies, a company called White Knights based in the Philippines, to put together a presentation showing basically how effective it was. So maybe the proposal wasn't executed, but Nader, appears to have paid Zamel quite a bit of money, and one of the things he got for that money was a presentation that could have been shown to the Trump campaign to demonstrate that this social media campaigning got them over the line. So it's quite a murky picture.
So we don't know, sorry to interrupt you there for a second, we don't know that the social media campaign was actually enacted.